I call to order the May 16, 2017 meeting of the Arvada Planning Commission. Ms. Brown, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Jenny Wolfschlag. Here. Michael Griffith.
Here.
T.O. Owens.
Here.
David Goff.
Here.
Patricia Connell.
Here.
Doug McGee.
Here.
Steve Hannon.
Here. I will now turn the meeting over to the planning manager, who will preside until the election of the chairperson.
You might take one step, Chairperson Goff, in entertaining a motion to suspend the bylaws because those call for elections in June, and under the circumstances with 3 new members, we're moving forward at this point in time, I think, logically enough. You might take that action.
Can I get a motion to suspend the bylaws to hold the elections?
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? T.O., Patricia, and Steve, could you vote? Okay, it's, sometimes that happens.
I can see the red light.
Okay. How do you vote, Mr. T.O. Owens? Yes. How do you vote, Steve?
Yes.
And the remainder of the chair of the committee votes 5-0, so it's now 7-0 voted in favor of. I don't know why that didn't work. Okay. All right, I now turn the meeting over to the planning manager, who will preside over until the election of the chairperson.
All right, thank you very much. Any member may nominate any member, including themselves, and no second is required. Any nominee may decline as well. After nominations, each officer shall be elected by a majority vote of the commission until one person has received the majority of all members of the commission. Successive votes will be taken. With that, are there any nominations for chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what to call you.
Rob.
Rob, yeah. Rob, I'd like to nominate T.O. Williams as our chairman.
T.O. Owens, okay.
T.O. Owens, what did I say?
Williams.
Sorry,
You're giving him the mayor
Yeah,
position already. Okay, we have a nomination. Do we ask for any more nominations? Just go with that. Okay. Okay, do we have any other nominations? Patricia?
Yes, I would like to nominate David Goff as chair for the current Planning Commission. He's always exhibited good direction and professionalism.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, let's first take a vote for Mr. Owens.
Yeah,
Does not seem to be working.
I think under those circumstances, maybe just by a show of hands, a record will still be made, obviously. So I believe the vote now being taken is those in favor of T.O. Owens as chairperson would raise their hands at this point. Let's let the record reflect the vote.
We'll let the record indicate that there were 4 votes for Mr. Owens.
I think the record should let's make sure the record shows the vote. And it was Ms. Wolfschlag, Mr. Griffith, Mr. Owens, and Mr. Hannon. Okay.
Okay, and so then, therefore, by the rules, you have a majority voting for Mr. Owens. With that, I will turn it back over to the current chairman to handle the other elections.
Thank you. Are there nominations? Now we have the chairperson okay. Sorry. Are there any nominations for the vice chairman? Mr. Hannon.
I would recommend Mr. Goff for our vice chairman.
Ms. Connell.
That was going to be my nomination for you also.
Are there any other nominations? Now, please vote for David Goff. Please cast your vote for vice chair. Okay, it works now. 7 favored, none opposed. Are there nominations for secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Ms. Connell for our secretary.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? All right. Please make your vote for secretary. Connell. Those in favor, 7, none opposed. Thank you. Congratulations. The minutes of May 2nd, 2017, the minutes of May 2nd, 2017 meeting have been submitted for approval. Are there any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes? No corrections. The minutes stand approved as printed. Going on to general business, there are no general business items to discuss this evening. Also on the reports, there are no reports items to discuss this evening. And it is now time to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. On to petitions and communications. This is a time when anyone may address the commission regarding items that are not listed as public hearings on tonight's agenda. The public hearings scheduled on tonight's agenda are Old Town Commons Townhouse rezoning and Old Town Commons Townhomes Preliminary Development Plan. Additionally, we ask that you hold comments you may have regarding any application that has been filed with the city or is likely to be filed with the city until the public hearing of those items, where we will welcome your comments. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the commission regarding anything else? See none, on to public hearings. At this time, I would like to explain the procedure for public hearings. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation. After the presentation, I will ask those in favor of the applicant to speak, then those in opposition to speak. The applicant will then be given an opportunity for rebuttal. After all the testimony has been heard, the public input portion of the hearing will be closed and questions will be taken from the Planning Commission. I will now like to swear in anyone that wishes to speak in any public hearing matter before this commission this evening. Please raise your right hand, and I'll swear you all in now. Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in matters before this commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please answer, I do. Thank you. You may be seated. The public hearings in tonight's agenda include Old Town Commons Townhome rezoning and Old Town Commons Townhomes Preliminary Development Plan. Staff, are there any posting or notification requirements?
Yes, 3 forms of notification were required. The notification was required to be published in the paper, which was done by staff. There was also a mailing required for all property owners within 400 feet of the subject properties, and a posting on the property. Staff has the affidavit of mailing and the posting log, and they're both in order.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any additions or corrections to the staff report?
No, there are not.
David, would you enter?
Yes, I will. I would like to enter in public record a letter from Rick and Debbie Bosch, dated May 16, 2017. The staff report, posting log, and affidavit of mailing are made a permanent part of the record. Staff, will we be making a presentation this evening?
Yes, a brief overview.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. The case before you tonight is a proposed preliminary development plan and rezoning for 0.426 acres of land at 4217 and, 5417 and 5421 Allison Street. The applicant is proposing to construct 2 5-unit townhome buildings that will be 3 stories and approximately 35 feet in height. Each unit will be approximately 1,700 square feet and will also include a 400 square foot garage. The applicant is requesting the rezoning from the existing residential multifamily to the planned unit development residential due to the fact that the proposed development would not be possible under the existing zoning. For the reasons detailed in the staff report, I present this case with a recommendation of approval subject to the condition found in the staff report. That concludes my overview, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a representative of the applicant present? Would you please step to the podium and state your name, spell it please, and provide your address for the record?
Hello, excuse me. Hello, my name is Andy Olree, A-N-D-Y-O-L-R-E-E. I'm with Design Edge Architects. I'm representing the ownership group on this project. My address is 600 South Harrison Street, Denver, Colorado.
I think you may proceed.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of Planning Commission, for the opportunity to present here this evening. I will try to be brief, but also be available for any questions at the end. As Jake had mentioned, our project is the combination of 2 existing lots, 5417, 5421, into one planned unit development that will contain 2 5-plex units in a townhome/row home style project. The project will, I'm going to hold up my board too, just 'cause it's easy for me to point, even though it's the exact same thing that is on the monitor. Yes. Okay.
And then, there you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
then I can just point.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, can everybody hear me without the mic? Are you guys good? I said I'm usually pretty loud, so that's okay. As I mentioned, the project is a combination of 2 existing lots into one larger development. The vehicular access will be off of Allison Street into a centralized alley that all of the 2-car garages for each individual residence will access.
Could you please speak into the mic? They can't hear you on the TV.
Sure. How is that? Okay. As I mentioned, the from vehicular access will be off of Allison Street onto a central alley that connects all of the individual garages. The units will be 3-story residential, a smaller ground floor with 2 levels above that. The existing RM zoning would allow for up to 5 stories, a little bit, I can't exactly remember the exact height, but we fall well within that existing zoning height restriction and story restriction. 4 visitor parking spaces have been provided in the back. That was something discussed and negotiated with Planning Department to provide in the back in lieu of the front to enhance the front views of the project. Excuse me. Pedestrian access for each individual residence will come in the areas of sidewalks on both the south side and north side. We've been working on this project for quite a while. When we initially came in to meet with planning, the project was received very favorably. The existing RM zoning is intended to encourage a wide range of housing types and cost, especially multifamily dwellings, to meet the diverse needs of the Arvada housing market. And as Jake mentioned, the reason to switch from the RM to the PUD was through consultation from staff. There were a few, we looked at initially going on a variance process through RM zoning, but were encouraged that the PUD process was the way to go to achieve the project that we're looking for. One of the other things, and I'll speak, I guess, to the rezoning one last time and then jump right into the PUD, excuse me. In review of City of Arvada's future land use plan, this area is listed as a high-density residential. It's within the TOD influence area. When I look at I pulled it off today just to make sure the future land use map, we are again in the high-density residential is the zoning that is, not zoning I'm saying, but the overall comprehensive plan for the City of Arvada seems to be encouraging this type of development within this area. When you look through the comprehensive plan, there are a multitude of goals and suggestions from encouraged development of transit supportive, higher density, mixed use, pedestrian oriented areas, targeted redevelopment areas for promote redevelopment in targeted redevelopment areas, including Old Town Station. So we believe, my clients, myself, that this project fits both the long-term land use plan, the existing multifamily zoning, and the desire for this area to be of high-density residential. 20 unit, if you multiplied it out, 20 units per acre in my world falls in a mid-level, not a high. High, you're into the 30, 40 units per acre would be classified more as high residential. So we're not even reaching that point of true high-density residential. So we're kind of, I think, in the middle ground of what the development's long-term goals could be. I'll keep here. Early on through the process, we, we met with the neighborhood association, or neighborhood groups and neighborhood individuals in the neighborhood. We had a meeting at the public library. We initially came with a proposal. The units were a little bit larger. We were a little bit closer on the north side in terms of setbacks. The allowed setback within a PUD zoning on a side setback is 7.5. We initially had proposed a 10-foot setback, but one of the things in discussion with neighbors was to push that a little bit further away from the north property line. So now all of our residential structures have a 15-foot setback on both the sides. Our front setback was something negotiated out with planning. We're a little less than what is required by a PUD. Some of that I would say is a hardship because we had to give 22 feet back to the City of Arvada. I don't know if you all view that as a hardship, but to my clients it was, in the sense of, but it obviously enhances the streetscape, improves the drainage and, from a technical basis, all of the things that will long-term make Allison a more pedestrian-friendly access from our development and other homes and residences along here up to Old Town, up to the light rail station. On the building itself, one of the things that we worked hard to do was provide four-sided architecture and also be complementary to the neighborhood. A lot of materials that are used, wood siding, vertical siding, horizontal siding, a good mix of that, along with a strong masonry base. What we've done is down the long side is have a lot of change in plane in the elevation. You can see that as you move. There's the third floor is out a little bit further, providing a covered balcony on the second floor. Some of the early planning stages was looking at rooftop decks. There were some concerns from neighbors along those lines too, of having such elevated decks. So our outdoor space is on the second floor, not up on the roof, 40 feet in the air. But as you can see, there's a lot of articulation coming down the side, so you don't have this massive wall. There's a lot of change, again, change of material, change of plane, and I think what we think that does is enhance the architecture along the sides as well. The view you see here would be from if you were standing in the street, kind of at the northeast corner looking at the project. And then lastly, this would be your kind of front view looking straight on into our project. They're a mirrored image on both sides of our newly constructed alley, meeting all the requirements, which was a bit challenging to meet all the requirements from drainage and storm and water and fire and everybody. But I think what we've come up with is a building that has a lot of articulation in it, a lot of visual interest, and it'll be an amenity to the surrounding area. That pretty much ends my presentation, and I'll leave it to questions or step back or tell me where I need to go. I also do have members from the ownership group and our civil engineer if there are technical questions, landscape of a landscape civil engineering basis. I know some people get very excited to talk about storm sewers. Some people could probably care less to hear about it, but we brought him just in case.
Thank you. I will now open the hearing for comments from the public. For those who are in favor of the application, state your name, spell please, and address for the record. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of the applicant? None. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. Please state your name and address and spell your name for the record.
My name is Debbie Besch, B-O-E-S-C-H-E. And my husband and I own the property 5423 Allison Street, which is the property just north of the proposed site. And I would like the staff also, because I don't have all of the information in front of me, but actually the reason that, from my understanding from talking to both the developer and the staff, that the whole reason that this is being introduced to go to a rezoning is because in fact there's 4 or 5 areas in which they are not meeting the requirements of the multifamily RM zoning. And it does state right in your zoning laws, whatever requirements, that that is not to be done, that the PUD is not to be used to get around and circumvent the requirements that exist. So, for example, the ones that I know of right off the top of my head without, being a staff member here, if there is a single-family ranch-style home next to a multi-family 3-story building, there needs to be a 45-degree plane setback. So if I do my math correctly, a square, that's a 90-degree angle, so 45 would be corner to corner. So we're talking 35 feet high. It should be 35 feet set back from our lot line. It is set 15 feet, not 35. That's a significant difference. That's you guys' law, not mine. Also, they are not meeting the requirements. Trying to think what the other things were. That, of course, is the one that is the biggest concern for me, personally, and the other neighbors down the way. There's also, I believe, open space that they are under on the open space requirements. They also cannot meet the requirements for the frontage setback. That is less than what it should be as well. What else, guys? Who did I talk to up there?
Ma'am, please address the commission.
Okay, well, I might need their assistance. I would like to hear what all the requirements are that are not being met.
And we can ask for their input after your...
Okay. All right, that's fine. So our problem is, imagine a 3-story building, so that's significantly higher than the ceiling we are looking at in here, 15 feet off of your lot line, we are going to have no sun in the spring and winter months. There's going to be snow and ice in our driveway, which actually is directly next to that property line. And that is very dangerous for both vehicles and pedestrians and my family. Also, I like to have sun. Okay, so in the summertime, if we get, halfway across our yard and clear to the north end, we might get some, if we're lucky, okay? That's a problem. A bigger issue, in my opinion, is the deck situation. And I was not okay, just so the record is straight. I did not want rooftop decks. I didn't want decks at all on our side because they are only 15 feet off our lot line. So imagine a deck at a second-story level, 15 feet off of your backyard. Not just one person, 5 different families. So let's say, I don't know, they each have 2 or 3, 5 people in their family. It adds up to a lot. They look directly into my entire backyard and can hear everything we say and see everything we do. That is a safety problem for us. That is just a personal security problem. I am completely against that. I would like to see the decks either moved to the interior of the project, or they can be removed completely as far as I'm concerned, either way. However the developers would like to handle that. Also, if you are putting up a 3-story building, and it doesn't matter whether, I think it was even with the PUD design, you need to have an 8-foot fence on your line next to our property, and they are recommending a 6-foot fence. Not sure why, but we would like the 8-foot fence for, again, security purposes, especially if that's a sidewalk, and eventually my understanding is could be a pedestrian walkway in the future. What else here? Oh, the other concern we had, they were thinking they probably would not do an HOA or any kind of situation that way. Again, for any properties that butt up to that, who's going to take care of the fence if there is damage or problems from a storm or vandalism or whatever the case may be? Landscaping that's on the property, that's common area. And so I have concerns about that, and the city should as well, because I don't know if you guys have driven past Allison Street and the location where they're at now, but it doesn't look very pretty. And I realize that they're trying to, obviously they don't want to put any money into the place till they can start building. So I'm not dissing them at all for that. It's just the way it is right now because they haven't been able to get started. But if people can't or don't take care of their things, that is what it looks like. And so if there's not a governing body to take care of the common things, I'm concerned about what will happen, and whether I'm going to have to deal with 5 different people on a fence line. Okay? I would say that those are my concerns. And I know I am only one person with one house on the north side of this property. I get that, and I understand that you are trying to, build up Arvada different than it has been. But I think it's really important for the city and the councils to try to be fair to everyone that's involved. And that means that not everybody gets what they want, and that we come to compromises that work for everybody. And I really think that we can do that if we work really hard to try to do that. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. Please state your name and spell, please, for the record and your address.
Would you swear me in first, please? I
You did-
neglected to do so before.
All right.
My apologies.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in matters before this commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please answer I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Excuse me. My name is Nancy Young, Y-O-U-N-G, as in forever young. And my address is 7706 Robinson Way here in Arvada. As I was listening to the developer and reviewing the application, one question came to mind. Why do we even bother having rules if we don't apply them equally? We have rules for a reason, and those rules are to protect existing citizens while allowing for new developments. This property is already zoned for multifamily housing. The PUD, they don't even have the PUD zoning, and they're asking for exceptions. They're asking for an exception to the rule, too, that I noticed. The setbacks, 15 feet. PUD requires 25. Lot coverage. They're asking for 40% lot coverage. That makes it a much more massive building. PUD requirement, 35%. Now, the staff says there are unique features on this property to include utility easements, right-of-way, related matters. That's not unique to this property. Virtually any infill property within the city of Arvada has exactly those same issues that need to be addressed. I recall not long ago, there was a school property that was severely limited on the lot because I believe it was the Croak Canal, ran through a corner of the lot. And what that group did is they developed a building to accommodate that easement and not encroach upon it. I see absolutely no reason to grant these exceptions to the rules. I see too many exceptions coming through this room, both for you and City Council, and as a citizen, it makes me wonder, do I have any rights? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. Sir, were you here for this swearing in? Okay. Please come forward and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give in matters before this commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please answer, I do.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and
Riley
address for the
Meehan.
record.
My name is Riley Meehan.
Please spell your last name.
M-E-E-H-A-N. And I assume we're talking about,
And your address, please.
well, my address is 2500 Federal Boulevard.
Thank you.
I also own 5411 Allison, which I believe is directly south of 5417. Yeah, that sure looks like it. My only concern, I understand development, and I'm not against that, but there is some water during a heavy rain that runs down to the north of my building through their property. And I would just like the water to stay there during the heavy rains. The building that I own, that apartment building, is a garden level, and I really can't afford to have the water on my property. And the water does get pretty, it must be for quite a little drainage area, because the water gets, I don't know, maybe as wide as this table here, and runs rather swiftly. And I just want it to stay over there. I don't want in other words, I don't want the elevation of the development to be such that the water goes onto my property. And that's my only concern.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition to the application? Thank you. Applicant, would you like the opportunity to rebut anything stated before you?
Yes, while it's fresh in my mind, can I ask the civil engineer to respond quickly to the water concerns that the last gentleman just raised?
Yes, you may. Excuse me, sir, were you sworn in?
Yes, sir, I was.
All right.
My name is Cole Haber, Haberer, and I reside at 9349 Wolf with an E at the end, Place in Highlands Ranch, Colorado.
Thank you.
So in respects to the drainage concern, There is an existing, I just need the site plan. Thanks. There's an existing sewer and drainage easement that runs along this border here, and this gentleman's property is right here. That easement collects all the runoff from the Weeping Willow subdivision, which is about a 4-acre subdivision over here. And currently there exists a drainage pan. It's about 3 feet wide, and that channels down to a culvert right here. In our working with your staff and engineers, we designed a catching concrete channel to an inlet here that then goes to a 18-inch plastic pipe that runs into the storm sewer here. That pipe is designed to capture at a max 11 CFS in a 100-year event. We were not able to find what the actual quantities were, so we assumed worst case and calculated our own that 13 CFS in a 100-year event would flow through here historically. So we're taking 11% of that. Then we built a 9-inch berm in our grading model between our property, on our property, and installed a little catch basin here that then channels into the storm sewer as well. So in an event, all the water will be channeled through this pipe. Any minor overflows, 2 CFS, 14 gallons per second, would come down here and be captured through this secondary. And if that got clogged, this berm is higher than this location, and it would flow into the street. And so we've engineered all of that to protect your property, which is required by state and staff. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
I hope that clarifies the drainage issues with respect to that. I will bounce around a little bit because I was making notes on the 2 individuals who spoke in opposition. With regards to a 6-foot versus 8-foot fence, we would be more than happy to put an 8-foot fence in. It has just typical fences are 6 foot tall, and so that's what we put in our proposal. We'd have no problem doing that. With respect to an HOA, that has yet to be determined. We've kind of discussed some of that with the city. The city is also, it seems a little bit, and I don't want to speak for you, Jake, but it seems that they are wrestling with it themselves on how best to plat and divide up these type of properties. So there's been no decision made with respect to that. There obviously has to be some sort of, whether you call it an HOA or a general agreement for snow removal and things of that nature, it just has to be in place. We just don't know what that language and how that document will be drafted. But we, when I say we, the developer acknowledges that something has to be addressed in that, and we're working with the city to ensure what's best for everybody. With respect to open space, we meet the open space. And so I don't know what else to say about that. We meet it. With respect to the front setback, we initially came in with a meeting the front setback, but the city took more of the land back for the right-of-way, so that encroached more on our property. And so when we've continually lost part of the front of our site, we feel that is a bit of a hardship, and is why we have decreased that front setback. With respect to side setbacks, again, we far exceed what the minimum standards are for those. With respect to a 3-story structure, you could build a 3-story single-family residence here. The height restriction is not, limited to, if somebody wanted to, buy this property or they could build 2 single-family 3-story structures, and you would have tall structures next to you. That's, again, a use by right within the zoning that's allowed. The primary reason for switching was the bulk plane. And where we have an issue with the bulk plane is zoning guidelines typically are based on zoning, not with use within the zoning. So when one property's use restricts the other property's use, when there was a lot of points brought about what we're doing is not fair or not to our neighbors. The existing zoning, the way it is written, is unfair to the multifamily zone district in itself. When one use, not a zoning change, but a use within a zoning is able to dictate what you are allowed, or restrict what you are allowed to build. Because the RM zoning, like I said, you could go 5 stories, you could go 3 stories, you could go 4 stories, you could do a lot of different things. But because of a use that is next door, the south property, we have a 3-story building next to us. It's the same zoning as us. The same zoning to the west, the same zoning to the east. They're all 3 and 2 stories to the west, 3 stories to the south, 3 stories, I'd say 3 stories plus when you really look at the ones to the east, and then a single-story, single-family residence to the north. So if you looked at it in the opposite, let's say you had 3 vacant lots and you were all in a multifamily district. If somebody came in first and built a single-family home, they have now devalued the 2 adjacent properties in the sense that they affect how those multifamily structures can be built. It's a, I'll call it glitch within the zoning, in my opinion, that usually when you have zoning up against another district, then those rules seem to be more relevant and apply. But when you have a use that gets restricted within the same zoning, that's very complicated and something you just don't see very often, if ever. I mean, I haven't seen it ever until this project. The zoning was always RM. I mean, well, I shouldn't say always. You guys would probably know that better than me. But it seems to have been RM, based on my research, it's been RM for a while. It's a multifamily district. When you have single-family homes in a multifamily district, again, it's an anomaly from that standpoint. Excuse me. And then with respect to compromise, sure, we've made some compromises. Maybe we have not made all the compromises that the individuals may want, but we made some compromises. We made the residences smaller. We pushed them back from where we were. With respect to, people love rooftop decks. I mean, I do a lot of housing. It's a popular thing in Denver, in Inglewood, in Arvada, in Littleton, you name it. They're very popular. So it is a consensus that hurts the overall sellable value to my client. Having a deck on the second floor, as I mentioned, if you had a single-family house, that's not an uncommon thing to have. So some of the things that were suggested, we just don't feel are really that out of the ordinary. Did I hit them all? I think. Okay. I think that's it. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. At this time, I will close the public input portion of the hearing. I now open the hearing for discussions, questions, or comments from the members of the Planning Commission. Commission. Mr. Hannum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for the applicant. We talked about not having a homeowners association, but still having to come up with some way of moving snow and taking care of the sidewalks. And any idea much at all on how that will end up being worked out?
Can I speak? I was sworn in.
Thank you.
My name is Matt Koren. Last name's Koren. I reside at 5390 East Nichols Drive, Centennial, Colorado. I represent the builder and the owner, and we have been going back and forth with the issue of how do you kind of govern these communities, and I've always described them in the context of what you see in Denver as sort of an experiment in progress, so to speak, right, as they come home to roost yet. The HOA is not out of the question yet, and a lot of it is going back and forth with, is the best way to allocate responsibility for the units versus a series of deed restrictions or a series of easements, which tends to be, when you're dealing with this attached single-family product, to be able to sell them fee simple, is the cleanest way to do that is with a litany of easement restrictions or deed restrictions. But an HOA at the same time makes a lot of sense as well, but as you all know, that's also technically usually the conduit to construction defects. Right or wrong, that is usually how it enters the stream, so to speak. So one of the reasons that it's still being kicked around is possible changes in construction defects law that are going through the legislature right now, which, if I understand, would change the buy-in from the different homeowners as the catalyst to commence a lawsuit. And then the reverse of that is also that a 10-unit project like this is not really on the radar screen so much for construction defects. So right now we're kind of balancing those. I wish one of the other members of the ownership group is not here, but he's going back and forth with his attorney right now trying to figure out what's the best way. But I think option A or B is deed restrictions, easements, fee simple, or something that has a homeowner's component. And again, we are open to suggestions. We're open to what the kind of the preferences of the city based on your experience and what you've seen as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hang out.
Sure.
If you were built tomorrow and we have a foot of snow, where would the snow go? Where would we move the snow to?
Where would we move the snow? That's always the example that I always bring up, as a matter of fact, and I think that's why that is the argument for the HOA. As small as it might be and as little as it may have to do, that is the best argument for the HOA. What I always say is, if you're the middle unit, where do you shovel your snow? Onto your neighbor's driveway? That's not going to be good for neighborly relations. And so, it's also why I say I don't think it's really come home to roost where they've been doing this, and that's exactly what they've been doing. And in some instances, I've heard of, there's collaboration between the neighbors. We'll all go in together and we'll get snow removal service. I would argue for the HOA in that scenario. And I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I mean, but it will be similar to any other residence. So you will shovel it onto the yard space that you have. I mean,
Okay.
That's where it will ultimately have to go.
So when I look at
I'd
your...
love to say we'd push it in the street, but you guys probably wouldn't like that.
Yeah, no, the city wouldn't like you. So when I look at your plan, there's not a whole lot of place to put it except for your visitor parking, or can't put it on top of your transformer, so I can't go that way. So it's a little tight to try and do some sort of snow removal. How about trash and recycling? Is there going to be common, or is each unit responsible for their own?
Each would be responsible for their own.
Okay, so in my two-car garage, I got to keep my trash cans also, and my recycling can.
It's what I do at my house.
Yeah, me too. It's
not ideal, it's not great, but.
And the garage size is 19 by 20 and a half? Okay. We have 4 parking spots for 10 units and a 19 by 20 and a half foot garage. So my Suburban wouldn't fit in the garage. So I'm probably going to be in one of those 4 spots. There's not a lot of other parking there in the neighborhood. This probably is staff. Staff, if we looked at what this is going to do to parking?
As far as how the visitor spaces are kept, open or allowed to be used by the residents, that's typically something you'll see worked out through the covenants and the deed restrictions, and we would ask that they reserve those for visitors. So, and that's another kind of good neighbor thing. If you have 2 of the residents taking up 2 to 4 of those spaces, obviously the other residents aren't going to be happy. So that's what we would request. I will say, in regards to the parking in general, staff did previous research on kind of best practices and best parking standards for TOD style developments. And the numbers that were generated through that research were for let me grab my notes here. It was for 0 to 2 bedrooms, they should have one minimum of 1 space per unit, and for 3 or more beds, 2 spaces per unit is kind of best practices and a TOD influence area. So their request to go from the 2.5 per unit, which is our standard parking requirement, down to essentially 2.4 per unit. We felt that was a reasonable request given their location in close proximity to both the G-Line station and Old Town and the TOD influence area.
Okay. On the east side of the street, staff again, on the east side of the street, there's little cutouts where people can park. We don't have that on the west side?
No. We did explore that as part of the development review process. The fact of the matter is there just wasn't enough room between the end of their property and their driveway to get effective spaces in. Okay. If we had a larger, more comprehensive, cohesive development, that's something we would have definitely pushed for, and I'll see if John would like to add anything more to that.
That's absolutely true. What Jake said, we were initially looking for for on-street parking in addition to what is being presented. Unfortunately, the dimensions did not work out. However, on-street parking along the entire corridor is public parking. Therefore, the next properties, where development is occurring, they are being required to add on-street parking, and that would be allowed.
One more for staff. On page 6 of the staff report, there's a discussion on building height, and the second paragraph kind of confuses me, so could you walk me through that?
I'm guessing I know what part it is, but let me get there. The second paragraph.
Yeah, the standard would apply for the northern, that part.
So really that's trying to explain the bulk plane standard, stating that 35 feet is the base maximum height for the RM zone district without a height exception, which has to be approved by City Council. So by right, you can build up to 35 feet in height. However, there is the bulk plane standard, and I was just trying to give an example. Say if applied, the bulk plane standard would restrict a building's height to 15 feet given the proposed 15-foot setback. So where the building currently sits at the northernmost portion of it, that part would be restricted to 15 feet in height, and then it would be able to project at a 45-degree angle, so a foot in height for each foot of setback is what I was trying to explain there, and it probably would have been better done with a diagram. I apologize.
No, not a problem. Just trying to make sure I understand. So for the applicant, did you look at a shorter building on the north side at all?
Yes.
And just couldn't make it work?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Hannan. Commissioner McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions for the applicant. Is there enough flexibility in your design to articulate the roof more and cut it out so that there would be more sun to the neighbor to the north? Can you change the roof line to accommodate? Now, if you're willing to lower the height of the building, they would love that more so. But is there flexibility in the design to break it up more is what I'm asking.
Well, can you guys see that or no?
Upside down.
As you can see from the side, there is a
Can
lot
you
of...
grab the mic? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
As you can see from the side, there is a lot of break, and we did that consciously, one, for visibility. It breaks it up. It does change the roof. It does allow not as tall across the entire length. So I think some of the articulation that we have done is what you're suggesting. Could it get shorter? I need to just go back to the drawing boards and look at certain things like that, but I think that there is and it's forward enough that where their yard sits, the southwest afternoon sun is not going to be blocked at all.
Okay.
I would say where the building sits with respect to where your backyard sits, you'll have a lot of southwest sun in the afternoons. I'd be happy to.
All right.
I like
We need to
barbecue.
keep the
comments
conversation
only
between
from
the person at the
applicant.
podium and
you.
I'm sorry.
the planning commission.
Okay, so the 4 visitor parking spaces, and Commissioner Hannan brought up an idea that I hadn't thought of, that he might park his vehicle there and not park it in the garage. Would you allow tenants to park a recreational vehicle there, a boat, an RV of some kind?
Again, that would be up to the owners. I would say no from the standpoint of, again, you have limited space from that standpoint. Those are visitor, they're not anybody's individual unit. I don't know all of the zoning restrictions with respect to boats and things. I would imagine there's some, but I would say that when they're drafting that up, it's something that they would certainly should consider putting in there.
So what would be the strategy? So it sounds like a construction trailer, a tenant is in the trades business and pulls a trailer for his work, his or her work, that you wouldn't allow that either or wouldn't want that to happen. What would be your strategies to keep those parking spaces open to the visitors to these two units, these two buildings?
Well, I think as Matt had mentioned, either you have deed restrictions or you have certain covenants within. If there is an HOA, in fact, you have certain rules that will be put in place to govern those things. And then you still are, you're on an honor system to some degree, and neighbors respecting each other's, respecting that those are visitor spots only. I don't see where one neighbor is towing another's car as a good solution or something like that. But certainly if you put the rules in place, at least that gives people that mutual respect that they should adhere to.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for staff. Can you please explain the restriction in the RM zoning around the bulk plane and why there is that restriction?
Well, Mr. Ulrich spoke to this a little bit, but there's two different ways to kind of create restrictions within a zoning district. You can do it by adjacent zoning. So you say, if adjacent to a single-family zone district, you shall have this size buffer between that and a multifamily building. You shall have a reduced height for, X amount of feet. So that's per zoning district boundaries, which is more common in suburbs. The other approach you'll see is, it's more common in urban areas. The other approach you'll see is by the actual use, regardless of the zoning, and that's the way Arvada is. So Arvada says even though the property to the north is zoned residential multifamily, and they could develop it as multifamily in the future, we are, the zoning speaks to the existing use on the land, and it says if that use is a single family, then you shall adhere to the bulk plane standard. So again, it's just a distinction between use and zoning, if that makes sense.
And why do we have a bulk plane standard?
I believe the intent of the bulk plane is to mitigate impacts or potential impacts from non-residential development or multifamily development. In fact, the standard says anything other than a single family home shall not exceed the height of the adjacent home or must comply with the one-for-one bulk plane standard.
And do you suppose that we have those here in Arvada because suppose Allison was built in the late 50s prior to them being zoned, and so when we overlaid RM zoning on that property, the single-family home pre-existed, so even though we wanted to have multifamily in the future, we wanted to protect the integrity of those single-family homes?
That's a tough one. Allison might not be the best example because if you look up and down Allison, there's lots of examples where that isn't the case, where we have three-story, for example, the property to the south might not be able to get built under today's regulation if 5417 were to stay a single family. But I believe that it was put in at some point, it's hard for me to speculate, but I think it was put in for situations where you might have non-residential uses adjacent to single-family residential uses. I don't really want to speculate anymore than that because I do not know the history. I do not know when that specific provision was added to the zoning ordinance. And I don't have the institutional kind of memory or history to know if there was a specific cause. We have some rules like the 150-foot setback from center line of arterial streets that was the result of the West 72nd widening. We kind of know why that came about. I don't really know why this particular standard came about.
Sure, thank you. That's all the questions I have. I do have a comment. In our rezoning criteria, letter E says the rezoning is compatible with existing planned development on adjacent properties and in the surrounding area or neighborhood, and measures will be taken to substantially buffer otherwise or mitigate incompatibility. I think this is where I am currently stuck because I believe that my supposition is that the home directly to the north was built prior to that being zoned RM. And so the zoning RM protects that home from having shadows in their backyard all day and having ice on their driveway all the time. And so, and I'm ready to be convinced, but my concern is that I cannot find that E is met. I believe that this project will adversely affect that property to the north. And I don't believe that there has been enough mitigation. Again, I'm ready to be convinced, but at this point, this is where I'm stuck on the rezoning.
Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like a clarification from the staff, if possible, on whether or not this project is meeting the open space requirements for RN or PUD, and how.
Let me verify the open space. The open space, I believe, in the PUD zone, it's hard because on this one, typically when people do a rezoning to a PUD, it's because they have a use that they're pursuing that's not allowed under the current zoning. This one's a little different because the use is allowed. They were looking, they're making the argument, and staff recommended based on the idea that this is a unique context. There is public utilities, two public utilities going across the property, which is not common in the city. The driveway location is pretty much predetermined. There's not a lot of altering the site. So when we're analyzing this, typically we analyze what they're asking to be modified from the base standards in the PUD. However, this one we had to kind of look at both what are the base standards in the RM and the base standards in the PUD. I believe the PUD open space, so based on the high density residential development or designation under the comp plan, it's a 25% open space requirement, and they do meet that. And I did, when speaking with Deb, give her incorrect information on that. Under a previous iteration of the plan, they were at 23.2 or something along those lines, and they weren't calculating it correctly, but they do meet the 25% open space. They do not meet the building lot coverage standards for the footprint, but for the open space they do.
And how is that calculated?
The open space essentially is area not covered by sidewalks, buildings, driveways. They can, certain recreational surfaces can count. Essentially, there's in Article 6, it talks about what can be counted as open space and what can't. Things like detention ponds can be counted as open space, but a typical sidewalk, driveway, buildings can't be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolfschlag.
Thank you, Chair. One more question for staff. Can you walk me through, you mentioned there was an existing utility easement through the center of the project, and that kind of dictates where the driveway go. Can you walk me through what that easement exactly is?
Yeah, it's actually not so much, it's a combination of two things. There's an existing water line through, water main through the center of the property. It runs just south of the property line at 5417 Allison. In addition, when they're having a common shared driveway with 10 units coming off of it, our traffic group wants to align that to the greatest extent possible with, let me pull up the map here, with West 54th Lane, or excuse me, it's not coming up, but is it Lane? Yeah, with this street here to create conflicts. They don't want a large offset there. So that dictates that, along with the water line location. They are moving the water line, I think, about 5 to 8 feet north. I forget it off the top of my head, to align it with the kind of inside that 24-foot utility and fire access easement that'll go over the top of the shared drive.
Okay.
So it's kind of a combination of both the driveway alignment and the utility.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, do you have any? Oh, I'm sorry, Pat. Please speak, Ms. Connell.
Based on all of the information that has been provided, does it seem that the questions that have been brought up by the citizens and the information provided, that this does meet the qualifications for Arvada based on everything that has been presented?
Well, as I attempted to detail in the staff report, that we felt that given the unique the unique situation on the property, the two public infrastructure lines, the driveway requirement. We also have the high-density residential designation. We have a lot of very urban building form around the area with buildings out towards the street, pretty much throughout the Water Tower District. We've seen a lot of other redevelopment happening on Allison that is high density for Arvada. For this combination of reasons, we felt that this met the standards. I understand that the single-family home directly to the north, you can make an argument that those aren't completely compatible, but I think if you take a look at the totality of the area, we felt that it was compatible with both what is on the ground and with the vision of that area moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cole. So I have just a couple of questions. Again, it's been asked, and I just need clarification on my behalf. And when looking at this project, in the absence of an HOA, if I'm living there and there's 3 feet of snow, is there anybody coming in there to clean out? It's up to me to clear out the driveway, me and my neighbors working together, or is there going to be a snow removal? And the second question would be, because everybody's going to have a 96-gallon trash can and maybe a recycling bin, are we expected, if everybody had a different, let's say half the residents use waste management, another half use it, are we going to have 2 or 3 trucks going in there on a weekly basis to pick up the trash and recycling?
I would say in developments that we've done like this, that's not the case. But, look, the HOA issue is one that I think the ownership group can solve. It is the 3 foot of snow, those are real world problems. And if it has to be solved through legal documents when people purchase homes, I think that's easily done. But just to reiterate some of the conversations with staff, it was, they asked the question and we're like, well, which way would you like to go? And they're like, well, we're not really sure. So it seems to be, as Matt said, it's not a unique problem, but it's a problem that people are asking questions about. And so we want to solve it the best way possible because, to have a project that has problems, it's still a small town. Denver's grown. You don't want to have projects that have problems. It's not good for the developer. It's not good for the owner. It's not good for anybody. So the best way, whether that be the HOA or whatever, that vehicle will be solved.
Thank you. And one other question, it probably goes back to Commissioner Hannah's comments specifically around the parking availability. There's 2.4 units, 2.4 parking spaces per unit. And in Commissioner Hannah's example was his Suburban wouldn't fit in the garage. And so I had a Suburban, I have a pickup, and that wouldn't fit in the garage either. So I'm just stating that primarily because you're asking for, the applicant's asking for a reduction in the space from 2.5 to 2.4 per unit, correct?
Yes, we were initially under the impression that it was 2.2. The zoning has 2 different caveats. It's either 2.2 or 2.5. And after the first round of submittals, 2.2 is when you have like an open, like the water tower across where you have communal parking. That's a 2.2. We, halfway through our process, we hit the 2.5. It was just something that we didn't realize initially going in. But as Jake had said, 2.5 on a TOD site is, historically, it's just not consistent with TOD development.
Okay.
And that 0.1 space, which here would be 1 space, we agreed with respect to the reduction. So.
All right, thank you.
Can I chime in on that as well?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. I think kind of going back to the discussion about the Suburban and the number of parking spaces, whether we had 2.5 or 2.4 isn't going to solve the problem of the Suburban. It's not going to fit in the garage probably anyways. And we see that not just with developments like this, but even single-family homes where, a vehicle like that or a recreational vehicle is just not going to fit in the garage. These are for sale products, so that's kind of one of those things. That's a consideration for the buyer to take into account when they're looking whether or not they want to purchase that unit. I always went back to the snow removal question that you had, and I thought the issue you raised about, a vehicle, somebody parking a third vehicle or, a boat or something in one of the visitor spots and how do you enforce that was a really good question. So the more I've been sitting over here thinking about it, and again, I don't think I'm in a position to commit to anything, I tend to think that maybe the HOA is the right route to go. And I think what kind of drives that is the visitor parking. And again, in other areas, we don't see that kind of visitor parking at TOD sites. It just doesn't exist. And so that removes this huge realm of common area that requires enforcement. Not to simplify it, but in a lot of these situations, people just figure out a way to work out the snow removal. And I'm not saying that's a best practice, but it's humanity coming together and saying, okay, how are we going to solve this problem, I guess. But with the visitor parking and the need to have an ability to regulate that so somebody doesn't have a broken down car and on 4 cinder blocks sitting there, I think you do have to have a vehicle to enforce that. And so, my takeaway from this would be that probably is the best way to go. And we have the insurance, or we will have the insurance on this that covers the statute of repose for the construction defects. So that's not that big of a threat, so to speak, if you were to go down that road. So,
Okay,
thank you.
If I could just jump in here for 1 second, Chairperson Gall.
Yes, sir.
I think it's not inaccurate to say that staff, I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but I think staff in dealing with this issue has generally been skeptical of an approach either here or otherwise in small multifamily developments that relies upon or party wall agreements or deed restrictions and so forth, in contrast to an HOA. The city's not had a tradition of dealing with and working in the context of party wall agreements within a development of this nature. And 2, I think there's conventional knocks against those sorts of approaches, and one of which being if one concern, and it's a legitimate concern on the part of the city, is the ongoing maintenance and ongoing appearance of a particular development, when you leave it to individual property owners and party wall agreements and so forth, you can have disagreements, you can have conflict, you can have the problem of that kind of the free rider phenomenon, in which one person thinks that deferred maintenance is perfectly fine, and another one thinks it's atrocious and some money needs to be spent on it. And the solution to that, in our opinion, is an HOA. Granted, a legitimate question is what size, what number of units creates a viable HOA. But in general, the city is, or the city staff is skeptical of approaches not involving an HOA, and would not necessarily find should you decide to recommend approval of this, a condition that an HOA be established. Similarly, conditions could relate to the declaration of conditions, covenants, and restrictions that are generally created for an HOA community. You could address those in a condition with respect to, for example, the visitor parking spaces being prohibited as a space for the property owners to utilize personally, or restrictions on recreational vehicles, towed vehicles, so on and so forth. Those are only limited, I think, given the constraints of this site and difficult challenges faced there and the concerns you're raising. Those types of conditions maybe are only limited by your own imagination.
Thank you. Commissioner Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A follow-up question for the snow. Was there ever a consideration for a snow melt system or something like that would sort of mitigate that concern?
We have not considered it, and again, that would be more based on just historic, the size of this project. It's Denver, it doesn't snow here, except for maybe Friday. I think maybe it's going to snow again, but a snow melt system, it just didn't seem practical. I mean, it's not off the table or anything, but it's just, we've never done one in a project this small.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, is there a motion? Commissioner Owens.
I move that Z2016-006 Old Town Condominiums rezoning from the City of Arvada RM Residential Multifamily to PUD-R Planned Unit Development Residential, 23.5 dwelling units per acre located at 5417 and 5421 Allison Street be recommended to City Council for approval. The motion is based on the findings of fact and approval criteria on page 10 of the staff report.
Motion is made. Is there any discussion of the motion? Commissioner Hannan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I love your project. I want to move there. It's gorgeous. I do, however, have problems with a criteria E, which is impact on existing and planned development on adjacent properties. And I'm not sure we've really taken into account what's already there and the impact on them. Until I press yes or no, I don't know which way I'll be going, but I have big concern about the impact to the neighbors on the, specifically on the north. I also have some concerns about parking, but I think the TOD, although I'm not sure I believe it, the TOD reduction in the amount of cars does make sense, and perhaps that people will move there just for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Hannan. Commissioner Owens.
I have been convinced that I cannot find E to be yes. And I think to me, it's plain in the wording of E, because it says adjacent properties and the surrounding area. If it said adjacent properties or the surrounding area, then I believe that the development would be, and the rezoning would be appropriate. But it says adjacent properties and the surrounding area. And so surrounding area is fine, but I think that we're burdening that adjacent property pretty badly. This is one of the first projects I've seen like this. Infill is hard, and there is no bigger champion of a for sale product in the city than I am. I know we need more. I encourage us to have more, but we have a mixture in our city of older homes that are primarily, the older homes are single-story homes. I live in one of those older single-story homes. And boy, I can see that I wouldn't really love to live next to a 3-story building 15 feet from me. And I think that's exactly why RM zoning says that if there is a single-story family structure next to you, or a single family structure next to you, that you have to abide by the bulk plan law rule. And I think that if we don't abide by that rule, then we are adversely affecting that. And so I cannot support the motion that I made.
Thank you, Commissioner Owens. Is there any further discussion of the motion? All right, seeing no further discussion, commissioners, please cast your vote. Oh, come on. Please cast your vote. One more time. I'm sorry, this only happens every once in a while. All right, the motion passes, 4 in favor, 3 opposed. Those in favor, Commissioners McGee, Connell, Griffith, and Wolfsheim. Those opposed, Commissioners Goff, Hannan, and Owens. So the motion does pass 4-3. Be sure to speak with staff as to when this item will be going before City Council. Thank you, and thank you for your...
You do have one more vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do need to listen to one more motion. Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Owens.
I move that PDP 2016-0012, Old Town Condominiums Preliminary Development Plan, located at 5417 and 5421 Allison Street, be recommended to City Council for approval, subject to the conditions stated in the staff report. Item 1, pages... Oh, I'm sorry, that was denial. This motion is based on findings of fact and approval on pages 11 and 12 of the staff report. that I did.
Thank you, Commissioner Owens.
The only question, understanding, you may not support the motion, is whether or not you want to address issues with respect to the HOA or visitor parking, et cetera, or, whether you, Mr. Owens, in making your motion or someone else in proposing a friendly amendment to the motion would want to address any other issue.
I would certainly be amenable to a friendly amendment.
Mr. Hannan.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate that. I would like to amend that some vehicle be made in the PDP planning process to ensure that parking and snow removal and trash removal are considered and not impacting the neighborhood or surrounding residences.
Thank you. Is that satisfactory?
That is within the discretion of the person proposing the amendment. I would suggest that leaves, and there may be the intention that leaves the question of the HOA versus some other approach still open.
Yeah, that was my intention, leaving it open to whatever can be worked out.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hannan. Commissioner Wushak.
I would also like to add a condition that the 6-foot fence on the north property line be modified to an 8-foot fence. The neighbor to the north had asked for that, and the developer appeared to be okay with that. So I would like to make that amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to accept both of those amendments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McGee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Commissioner Owens said, this is a very difficult infill development. The southern property has 2 utilities, underground utilities or utilities that make it difficult. I think the developer with the city, they've worked for quite a number of months to try and come up with a product that will work in this area, because there's 7 or 8 homes to the north of this development that are single-family homes, all zoned residential multifamily. The fact that you could build a very large home, the home that's to the north has a fairly large footprint as well, and so you could have a home that would take up the entire footprint of the home to the north. So it's difficult. I was torn between this approving this and not, just because it could create problems for the landowner to the north, and that's typically not what a development should ever do, is create issues for another property owner. But I think the staff and the developers really come up with some ideas to try and mitigate that. I hope they can discuss how they might create more sun for the property to the north, because it's been difficult. Tough decision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Connell.
With the 2 friendly amendments, it certainly addresses the major issues that have been in contention. So, and it then strengthens the whole system that has been presented with the 2 major friendly amendments.
Thank you. Commissioner Hannan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be voting against the motion. Criteria 9 says the proposed use is compatible within the PUD and with adjacent uses in terms of scale, site design, and operating characteristics. And having the monolith 15 feet away from your property line and shading your driveway doesn't really meet that criteria for me.
I too will be voting against this motion, as I have the same feeling towards 9 on page 12 of the staff report. It's just, yeah, it's very impeding. So is there any further discussion from the commission? All right, commissioners, please cast your vote. We have 4 in favor, 3 opposed. Commissioners Goff, Hannan, Owens opposed. Commissioners McGee, Connell, Griffith, and Wilshire approved. So it does pass in favor of 4-3. All right, now I can say this. Be sure to speak with staff as to when this item will be going before City Council. Thank you, and thank you for your citizens' participation this evening. Other items. Staff, are there any other items to consider this evening?
We will not have a meeting on June 6th, so we do need a motion for that to be canceled.
All right, can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we cancel the June 6th meeting due to no business.
Thank you. Please vote. Voting in favor, 7-0 to go ahead and cancel the June 6th meeting. Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.